At a certain age, you stop being impressed by loud promises and you start paying attention to quiet math. I've sat at more than one kitchen table where the market wasn't crashing, the bills were paid, and yet the fear was heavy in the room. It's not the fear of losing money. It's the fear of running out of life before you run out of money, or rather, the other way around. Most people do a lot of things right. They work hard, they save, they contribute to the 401, they pay the mortgage, they get there. And then they wake up retired and feel financially fragile, like one strong wind could tip them over. The paradox is simple and uncomfortable. You can do almost everything right and still feel exposed if you ignore one principle that governs long-term security. I'm going to talk about that principle today, but I want to do it quietly, without fireworks. Think of this as a slow walk, not a sprint. If you take it seriously, it might be the last financial idea you ever need to remember. I'm old enough now to have watched this movie more times than I can count. I've seen the good decades and the bad ones. I've seen high inflation, low inflation, booms, busts, and the kind of boredom that makes smart people do foolish things. I've watched retirees who had everything on paper but no peace, and I've watched ordinary people with modest accounts sleep like babies because they built their finances on bedrock. I've made mistakes too. In my middle years, I tried to buy a little more yield than I deserved. I trusted products I didn't fully understand. I confused motion with progress. Every time I paid for that lesson, the same truth sat there waiting for me. The money is a servant, not a master. It works for you when you give it simple, boring jobs and time to complete them. I've sat across from engineers, teachers, nurses, and small business owners who did everything right. They hit their number. Then the headlines turned ugly, or the market wobbled, or the neighborhood changed, and suddenly they felt a draft in the room. I'd ask them a simple question: how much do you need every month to live the life you actually live? And most of the time, they'd give me a portfolio balance instead of a number. That's the first sign of the problem. You are not alone if you feel this way. The system taught you to chase a balance, not a cash flow. It taught you to stack chips, not build streams. It taught you to worry about volatility, not purchasing power. It told you to check your account value every day, but never taught you the safe pace at which you can draw down a lifetime of savings without turning the well dry. Here's the reframe. The one principle most retirees ignore, and almost all fragile retirements share. Retirement security is not a portfolio size problem, it is a spending rate problem. Your risk is not that the market goes up and down. Your risk is drawing more from your assets than those assets can reliably produce and replenish after inflation, fees, and taxes. Your safety comes from the relationship between your expenses and the real, inflation-beating cash your assets can generate over time. That relationship is the whole ballgame. It's the farmer's wisdom. You don't harvest the entire field because the field has to feed you next year and the year after that. You leave enough seed in the ground. When you retire, your field is the collection of productive assets you own, your slice of businesses, your bonds, your savings, your social security. Your harvest is your withdrawal rate. If the harvest is too heavy for too long, the field weakens. If the harvest is light and patient, the field grows stronger and the crop gets richer over time. Let me give you gentle math. There is no magic in it. It's boring, and boring is exactly what pays the bills. Take $1 million. That's the number everyone loves to use. If you draw 4% a year, that's $40,000. Sounds fine until you subtract the quiet leaks. If your all-in fees are 1% advisor, fund costs, little nibbles, that's $10,000 a year gone. Now your withdrawal is effectively 3% if you want the same $40,000. Then consider taxes. Depending on how your accounts are set up, you might give away another slice. Suddenly, your safe spend isn't $40,000 net. it might be $30,000. That's a different retirement. Here's another way to look at it. Every $100 you spend per month in retirement equals $1,200 a year. At a 4% withdrawal rate, that $1,200 requires $30,000 in capital to support it. Trim a monthly bill by $100 and you just erase the need for $30,000 of savings. Trim $500 a month, downgrade a car, negotiate insurance, simplify, and you just lowered the capital requirement by $150,000. It's not glamorous math, but this is the math that lets you sleep. Inflation is the enemy, not volatility. A 3% average inflation rate halves your purchasing power in about 24 years. That means a $40,000 lifestyle today needs to be roughly $80,000 near the end of a long retirement to buy the same groceries, medicine, and utilities. Volatility is the weather. Inflation is the gravity. You need assets that outgrow gravity. And you need a spending rate that doesn't assume the future will be kinder than the past. Warren Buffett has repeated a simple idea for decades. Own a cross-section of good businesses at low cost and leave them alone. He's also reminded us that the real risk is not whether the market bounces around. The real risk is losing purchasing power. When you remember that, your decisions get quiet and clear. You don't need clever. You need productive assets and time. Let me put a little more structure under this with lived principles. The first principle: define your floor. Write down the monthly number you need to live with. Dignity, housing, utilities, food, basic transportation, basic health care. Not vacations, not gifts, not hobbies. Your floor. This is the number that must be protected from the weather. Social Security is a crucial part of that floor for most Americans because it rises with inflation and it lasts as long as you do. Every year you delay claiming between your full retirement age and age 70, your benefit rises roughly 8% per year. That's not a fancy investment pitch. It's just how the program works. Delaying to 70, if your health and finances allow, can turn an anxious retirement into a calm one. It's the most reliable inflation-adjusted income most retirees will ever own. The second principle: keep the harvest light. If you want high odds of never running out in a long retirement, think in the neighborhood of 3%, not as a rigid law, but as a starting point for caution. In good years, you can give yourself a raise. In bad years, you hold steady or trim a little. The difference between 3% and 5% is the difference between sleeping through storms and moving your bed into the basement every time it rains. $1 million at 3% is $30,000. $1 million at 5% is $50,000. The second number looks nicer. The first number is built to last. The third principle: own things that grow. Cash feels safe, but it shrinks quietly when prices rise. Over long stretches, broad collections of businesses have historically outpaced inflation and increased the income they throw off. You don't have to pick the winners. You can own a low-cost index fund that buys a piece of hundreds or thousands of American companies. You can own some bonds to steady the ride and fund near-term spending. But the engine of retirement is ownership in productive enterprises that can raise prices, grow earnings, and share that growth with you. If you sit in cash because it feels good today, you wake up years later wondering why everything is more expensive and your safe money can buy less. The fourth principle: build a calm bucket. The dangerous time in retirement is not the average return, it's the order of returns. That's a mouthful, but it means this: 2 retirees can earn the same average return over 20 years and have very different outcomes if the bad years happen at the front for one and at the back for the other. The simplest antidote is to keep a few years of essential spending in very safe, boring assets: cash, savings, short-term treasuries. If your floor is $40,000 a year and Social Security covers $25,000, your portfolio needs to cover $15,000. Holding 3 years of that $15,000 in cash or near cash $45,000 gives you the power to ignore bear markets and not sell your businesses when they're down. When the market storms, you spend from the calm bucket and let your orchard recover. When the sun returns, you refill the bucket. This is not complicated. It is a behavioral trick that protects you from your own nerves. The fifth principle: kill the unnecessary fees. I've watched 1% fee drag create more damage than a handful of bear markets. On a $1 million portfolio, 1% is $10,000 a year. That's $833 a month, every month, for as long as you live. And it compounds, as the money you don't keep is money that can't grow. I'm not saying never pay for help. Good advice is worth more than 1% if it keeps you from wrecking your plan. But you want to be ruthless about product costs and asset management fees you don't need. Own low-cost index funds. Keep turnover low. Let compounding do the heavy lifting. The sixth principle: lower your fixed expenses first. Retirement is a game of margins. You don't need to turn $500 into $50,000 with a hot stock. You need to turn $50,000 less spending into $50,000 less required portfolio. Downsizing a home, paying off a mortgage, driving a simple car, choosing a cheaper insurance plan that still covers catastrophes. These are not glamorous choices. They are choices that lower your withdrawal rate without reducing your dignity. Every fixed bill you erase is a permanent raise to your retirement security. The seventh principle: understand taxes with common sense. You don't have to become a tax expert, but you should know which buckets you're drawing from. Money coming from a traditional IRA is taxed as ordinary income. Money from a Roth IRA is generally not taxed. Dividends and long-term gains in taxable accounts often enjoy lower rates. In the early years of retirement, your income might be low enough that converting some IRA money to Roth makes sense. That's not a trick. It's simply moving taxes from a higher bracket future into a lower bracket present. And when you spend, consider drawing first from taxable accounts, then pre-tax accounts, saving your Roth for last because it grows tax-free and can be a great hedge against future tax hikes or unexpected costs. The eighth principle: consider a small floor instrument if your nerves demand it. For some people, a simple ladder of Treasury inflation-protected securities tips covering a few years of spending can help. For others, delaying Social Security does the heavy lifting so well that they don't need anything else. I'm not a fan of complicated products with high commissions and low transparency. If you don't understand it in a quiet room, don't buy it. Stick to simple, liquid, low-cost tools you can explain to your spouse in a sentence. The ninth principle: set guardrails instead of rigid rules. If your portfolio has a good year, give yourself a small raise next year. If it has a bad year, skip the raise or even trim spending by a few percent. That tiny flexibility, say, changing spending by 3% in response to markets, can increase your odds of success more than squeezing out an extra 0.5% in return. People underestimate the power of flexibility. If you're willing to delay a car purchase, take a smaller vacation, or press pause on a remodel after a bad market year, you protect your principal and let your businesses recover without selling them at a discount. The 10th principle: don't confuse headlines with risk. You will be told, again and again, that this time is different. In some ways, it always is, but the fundamentals are stubborn. Human beings wake up each morning trying to make life better. Businesses find ways to serve them. They earn profits and share those profits with owners. Costs go up, and good businesses raise prices. The exact shape of that story changes every decade. The plot does not. Your job is to own the plot, not the scene. Let me weave these into a few simple pictures. Picture two retirees, both with the same $1 million. Retiree A spends 4% right out of the gate, has almost everything invested in stocks, and no cash buffer. The first 2 years of retirement are ugly in the market. Suddenly, they're selling at the bottom to fund groceries, and their $1 million becomes $700,000 before they know it. The math gets tighter, just as their nerves get frayed. Retiree B spends 3%, holds 3 years of essential spending in a calm bucket, and the rest in a low-cost stock index and high-quality bonds. When the market stumbles early, retiree B draws from the calm bucket, trims spending by 3% for a year, and lets the businesses recover. Same average returns over 20 years, wildly different outcomes because of order of returns and behavior. Picture a mortgage that costs $1,200 a month. Pay it off before retiring, and you reduce your required portfolio by roughly $360,000 at a 4% withdrawal rate. You didn't earn anything, you just removed a bill. In retirement, the absence of a bill feels better than the presence of a risky source of return. Picture Social Security claimed at 62, paying you $1,800 a month. Now picture the same benefit delayed to 70, paying close to double. That extra income is like an inflation-adjusted bond that lasts as long as you do and your partner does. If you've got the savings to bridge the gap and your health is good, delaying can be the difference between a retirement built on annual negotiations and one built on steady checks. Picture fees. You invest in 2 portfolios. Portfolio 1 costs 1.5% all in. Portfolio 2 costs 0.1% all in. On $1 million. That's the difference between $15,000 and $1,000 a year in costs. Over 20 years, assuming average returns, that might be the difference between going on vacation and explaining to your grandchildren why you can't. It's not dramatic, it's just subtraction. Picture a car payment. $600 a month is $7,200 a year. At a 4% withdrawal rate, that payment demands $180,000 of capital to support it. Drive a simple, reliable car you own outright, and you just gave your portfolio a gift. Now, none of this works if you think in quarters. It works if you think in decades. The farmer who plants in spring and rips out the crop in summer never eats in winter. Big money, the kind that lets you stop checking the stock ticker and start checking the weather, is made in the waiting. You might notice, I haven't told you the hot stock for this year. I'm not going to. I'd rather give you something that actually builds peace. Own a broad set of productive businesses at low cost. Keep a cash buffer for the rough patches. Spend at a pace your field can regrow. Cut the fixed expenses that don't make you happier. Claim the boring, reliable income you've earned, especially Social Security, at the right time for you. Protect yourself from the twin thieves of fees and inflation. And when the world screams, take a walk. Let me tell you about 2 friends from decades ago. One was a doctor, high income, fancy office. He retired early, bought complicated products promising high yield with safety, and took 6% from his savings because he felt he deserved it. The yields were fine until they weren't. He spent the first 3 years of retirement feeling rich and the next 10 feeling squeezed. He wasn't foolish. He was impatient. The other friend was a school principal, modest salary, paid-off house. He saved faithfully, retired with a chunk of money smaller than the doctor's first-year income. He claimed Social Security at 70. He owned a simple index fund and a bag of T-bills, spent 3%, took his cost of living raises slowly. He passed away in his late 80s with his account surprisingly larger than when he retired. He didn't win any headlines. He did win his time. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Safety in retirement does not come from how much you have. It comes from how slowly you take it and what you own while you do. Wealth is not a number. It is a relationship between what you spend and what your money can earn in real terms on your behalf, without demanding that you be a genius or a fortune teller. 10 to 20 years from now, if you follow these principles, your life doesn't look flashy. It looks light. You wake up and the essentials are covered. Social security and maybe a small pension pay for the basics. Dividends and interest cover the rest. Your portfolio is not a trophy. It's an orchard. You harvest only what allows the trees to grow. Prices rise over time, and so do the profits of the businesses you own. Your cash bucket is there, like a pantry, so you don't go shopping in a storm. Your health matters more than your net worth. You have options. You can say yes when it's meaningful and no when it isn't. You eat lunch with old friends. You take your grandchild to a matinee on a Tuesday because you can. There will be years that feel tight and years that feel generous. You won't need to change your plan every time the wind shifts, because your plan was built with seasons in mind. You will stop checking the market every day. You will realize the real dividend your money has paid you is the ability to ignore noise. I shouldn't have to say it, but I will. None of this is a guarantee. There are no guarantees. There are only probabilities. But the probabilities pile up in your favor when you respect the harvest and own the field, when you define your floor and protect it, when you keep enough cash to make it through rough patches, when you pay less for the same investment exposure than your neighbor, when you choose patience over hunger. People ask me, what would you tell your younger self about retirement? I'd say, live below your means. Buy a slice of the economy, not a lottery ticket. Keep your fees low and your effort consistent. Stay out of debt that buys you status instead of usefulness. If you're lucky enough to reach retirement, treat your portfolio like a well. Draw from it at a pace that lets the water rise. Spend your time, not your pride. They also ask, what would you tell your retired self? I'd say, you don't need the perfect plan. You need a good plan you can execute on your worst day. The perfect plan falls apart the first time. The market drops 20% and your neighbor brags about selling at the top. The good plan is simple enough to stick with. Own the world. Keep a calm bucket. Spend at a rate that lets you look your future self in the eye. If you're feeling fragile today, do one quiet thing. Write down your floor. Subtract your guaranteed income, social security, pension from that number. The gap is what your portfolio must cover. Build a small cash buffer equal to a few years of that gap. Put the rest into low-cost ownership of businesses and high-quality bonds. Spend 3% of your total portfolio as a starting point, adjusting gently with markets and inflation. Cut a fixed bill or two. Decide when to claim Social Security with patience. Then go live. It won't all be smooth, but it will be enough. I've watched people chase certainty all their lives. They never find it. The market doesn't offer it, and neither does the bank. What you can build is something better. Resilience. Resilience comes from simple assets and simple rules. It comes from not confusing motion with progress. It comes from accepting that the market owes you nothing and then owning it anyway, quietly, for a long time. You don't need to be rich to be secure. You need to be aligned. Align your spending with what your assets can produce. Align your portfolio with the enemy you face, inflation, not volatility. Align your behavior with time, not sentiment. When you do that, the noise fades. You hear the important things again. This is quiet wealth, and we believe the big money is made in the waiting. If this way of thinking resonates with you, you can support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. No pressure. I'll leave you with a final picture. An old orchard, end of summer. The fruit is heavy, but the trees are not stripped bare. You take what you need, and you leave the rest to grow. Come winter, you're warm. Come spring, the trees are stronger. That's the whole game. Not glamour, not headlines, just the quiet, compounding work of time, patience, and respect for the field that feeds you. You don't have to impress anyone. You have to outlast your worries. And if you remember, the principal retirement security is a spending rate problem, not a portfolio size problem. You'll find that dignity is less expensive than fear. The math is simple, the meaning is heavy, and the result, after a while, is a kind of wealth you can't show off because it looks like peace.